So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and seeing as there was the call for a castle siege, I'm going to be doing that today. And also this was sent to me by Blindness, who has been sort of harping on at me for the past month or so to actually do this one, but I did want to give a little bit more time because this was a settlement that at the time he sent it to me, I did do this settlement basically on the same day it was sent, actually, I believe. But I feel as though enough time has passed. This is a standard Medieval 2 settlement as well, albeit slightly edited with some of these Gondorian architecture features, so obviously these Gondorian / Dol Amrothian spires that are throughout the settlement. And interestingly enough, it is going to be Dol Amroth who are on the attack today, 3 Dol Amroth armies who are going to try and reclaim what is undoubtedly their settlement, because the Misty Mountains armies that are on the defence would never be able to build something with this much splendour to it. But it's going to be interesting because these are two factions who usually the roles would be reversed. Usually it would be the Misty Mountains attacking a Dol Amroth defensive position. So much like the last battle where we saw Rohan on the attack in a siege, we're going to be seeing Dol Amroth sort of out of their comfort zone a little bit as well. And interestingly enough, you know, Dol Amroth, if we compare them to Rohan, so just having a little look at the Dol Amroth armies as they line up out here, comparing them to Rohan, I do actually think they should be better on the attack in a siege, purely because when you compare them to Rohan, they do have more durability throughout their army, they do tend to have higher armour values, better shields as well, and that can be very important in a siege, just to try and absorb the punishment that's going to be coming your way inevitably as you funnel your way into some pretty solid defensive positions. However, in a way, they also have worse infantry than Rohan, mainly when it comes to their ability to deal damage, I think. Certainly Rohan have got, even in their line infantry, stuff like their Westmark infantry is going to be better at dealing damage than something like the Athlon men-at-arms by a little bit, but also they tend to have more of a focus around shock units, and in general their units in melee do tend to be very good at doing that sort of thing. However, having said that, it's not as if Dol Amroth are completely defenceless with regards to that, but we'll go through Dol Amroth now, seeing as we're outside the settlement, going through the attackers. Dol Amroth's infantry, I would say, is kind of underwhelming, especially when you compare them to obviously their closest allies in Gondor. Gondor's infantry is very good. Dol Amroth's always feels a little bit underwhelming, except for one particular area, which we'll get onto very shortly, because you can see a catapult here, which is obviously going to be useful in an offensive siege like this. But the area in which Dol Amroth do have very good infantry is this one, Heavy Swordsmen. Now, human swordmasters are, maybe as a unit type in general, not brilliant, but I would say Dol Amroth actually are very good and very useful. The Untitled Champions, when you compare them to units of a similar type, they are very good. But also one of the main things that they bring to the table is the fact that they are a fear-causing unit, which is quite a rare thing, especially among the Western Kingdoms of Men. For a unit of this cost to have the ability to cause fear among enemy units, especially when you're facing down a faction like the Misty Mountains here, can be very, very useful for pushing them over the edge and routing, and it's something that the Misty Mountains are going to have to be aware of. They're going to need to sort of supplement their lower tier units' morale with some of their morale boosters. Obviously the Cave Troll Drummers will be able to do that if they have brought them. But yeah, Untitled Champions, a very good unit, one that I most certainly rate. And of course the other Heavy Swordsman, which is a very well-known infantry unit of Dol Amroth, the Haven Guard, capable of going toe-to-toe with the best Heavy Swordsmen in the game, stuff like the Temple Executioners, the Noldorin Blade Masters. They are not out of place, keeping that sort of company. But I would say that these Heavy Swordsman units are the exception rather than the rule. When you get into units like this, the Athlon men-at-arms, especially without the armour upgrade, they are functional in the same way that other men-at-arms units from the Western Kingdoms of Men are, so reasonably durable, good shield value as well, but when it comes to dealing damage, they are not. It's not really their forte, and in comparison to some of the other units of this type, especially when you consider that they don't have their armour upgrade, they tend to not perform quite as well. They can still do the job, but it is one area in which factions like Gondor and Arthedain have a bit of an edge. Another decent unit of infantry that Dol Amroth have available to them are the Athlon Halberdiers. It's another thing which certain other factions don't have access to. But again, in an offensive siege like this, you do need to be careful when using phalanx units, because of course if you commit them too early, you're going to just get them shot up. And while the Misty Mountains don't have the best archers, they do have access to crossbows and javelins, which will be very, very effective against that sort of unit. We have the Black Swan Renegades, which are the other sort of mid to upper tier infantry unit alongside the Untitled Champions Dol Amroth have available to them. I don't really rate them as highly as the Untitled Champions, but there's no doubting that they still give Dol Amroth a much needed AP unit in close quarters. The Halberdiers can fill that role, but of course the fact that they're a phalanx unit does make them somewhat more specialised, whereas a unit of line infantry like this, you can utilise them a little bit more freely. They of course have better defensive abilities as well with their armour and their shields, those maces of course. And you know, in terms of cost, they are around the same sort of level as something like the the Alcarondas Legion, from Umbar. So it does give you an idea of how they're supposed to perform, but do bear in mind that they are very heavily tilted towards their AP focus. Civilians over here just for a bit of a meat shield, and then we have some Dol Amroth archers at the back, again without the armor upgrade, so being on the attack does mean you have to skimp a little bit. But even with basic archers, I should think that Dol Amroth should be able to have a bit of a skirmish advantage over the Misty Mountains at long range at the very least. But if the Misty Mountains make their settlement work for them, it'll be difficult for Dol Amroth to get their archers into a position where they're not immediately going to be showered by javelin fire and crossbow bolts, but we shall see. Belfalas Marines are a decent javelin unit as well, again nothing too spectacular but very functional, and of course javelins are such a useful unit to bring along in Reforged. Wanderers of Nimrod, so of course having rangers is always going to be in a siege, I would say, whether you're on the attack or the defence, you want at least one of your armies to bring rangers if at all possible because of how devastating they can be if the circumstances are right. The possible kill count is simply too great to ignore. More Dor Amroth archers over here, some Ethelond halberdiers, and then interestingly enough we have 2 units of the Dor Amroth pikemen, so this is an area where Dol Amroth can, again, sort of leverage their infantry over the Misty Mountains a bit because the Misty Mountains don't have any pikemen. They do have halberds, but they don't have pikes. So the pikes, if they are saved for the late game especially, they could be a real problem for the Misty Mountains to try and deal with. We've seen a solitary unit of pikes win a battle in the late game before. Interesting that he's decided to upgrade the armour of his pikemen and not his men-at-arms, to be honest with you, because I always feel like if pikes are getting shot up by archers, even with or without the armour upgrade, it's not really going to make too much of a difference, to be honest. I probably would have preferred to see it on the men-at-arms because they're going to be sort of wading into battle first, I think, and it would be more useful to absorb more ammunition there. King of the North is going to be playing as another Dol Amroth army, of course. We'll go through this army a little bit more quickly because it's going to be the same sort of thing. Athelon men-at-arms, of course. Strengths and weaknesses, as I mentioned before. Tirithea marksman, though, so he's gone for a little bit more of a higher tier, heavier archer. So, of course, better armour, better range stats in general. They're pretty much the Dol Amroth equivalent of Caer Andros marksman. The main difference between them is the Caer Andros marksman is significantly stronger in melee when all is said and done. The Tirithea marksman, they can still hold their own decently in melee because of their overall quality, but they're certainly not on the same sort of level as that. But still, interesting choice. Catapult, lots of siege towers with, again, the Haven Guard, Black Swans, more Ethelon men-at-arms, more pikes, albeit without the armour upgrade this time. Ethelond halberdiers, some Belfalas Marines, more halberds, more Black Swan renegades, and then 2 units of the Perithil champions, which again, I think is a good idea. And then over here, I think already the blue team seems to be bunching up over on one side of the settlement, which is interesting. We have Grim, who I think Grim actually sent me this battle replay as well, to be honest with you. So 2 players sent me this one, but we're going to be seeing it from Blindness's perspective because I'm sure he's very eager for that to be the case. Haven Guard, Ethelond halberdiers, some more Black Swan renegades, another catapult, so no shortage of artillery for the attackers certainly. Athelon men-at-arms, Perithil champions, 2 units of Tirithea marksmen and 2 units of Belfalas Marines. Pikes once again with the armour upgrade this time, Black Swan renegades, civilians, and then Ethelond halberdiers at the back. So we shall see if this Dol Amroth army has the quality necessary to carve their way through the legions of goblins that are on the defence. Tundra's Fox, again, going back to his roots, playing as the Misty Mountains here. Goblin infantry, of course, free for the first unit, so you may as well bring them just to stand in the way of an advance. And over here, I'd imagine it's probably going to be exactly the same sort of thing. Engsvitz playing as the other Misty Mountains army, so the Goblin infantry are over here, and then getting further back into the main body of the Misty Mountains army. We have some heavy Goblin infantry. They're going to need some support from morale buffing units and the like if they're going up against Perithil champions and Haven Guard. But there's so many of them at this point that obviously the Misty Mountains, even though it's a 3v2, the Misty Mountains are probably around the same sort of numbers as the Dol Amroth forces attacking them. So time will tell whether the quantity approach will work. Goblin archers, very basic archers, but still very useful in this sort of situation because you either shoot your arrows into them and feel as though you're kind of wasting your more expensive archers, or you leave them be and allow a very cheap unit to rack up a decent kill count. Very useful unit indeed. But of course the main problem for the Dol Amroth forces throughout the entire Misty Mountains roster, I would suggest, is going to be the heavy Goblin crossbows. If you can shut the crossbows down or at least reduce their effectiveness from the attacking perspective, then you stand a much greater chance of going on to be the victor in this fight. If the crossbows are able to sort of do their full damage, then you may end up struggling, especially if they're able to pick and choose their targets. We do have some Mountainuric Coast and some heavy Goblin spears, so decent AP and decently armoured spearmen, as well as the Mountainuric Coast, who are of course a very efficient unit of line infantry, as I've said before. We've got some Goblin archers, a Mangonel, which the Mangonel is always very hit and miss. I mean, the morale debuff could have just as catastrophic an effect on the Misty Mountains themselves as Dol Amroth, but we shall see. Snaga Skirmishers, more Heavy Goblin Spearmen, Mountain Orc Berserkers are on the defence as well, so that AP is going to be useful. The Misty Mountains do have several AP options, which is going to be of great help against the Dol Amroth Infantry. Heavy Goblin Spears, some Snow Trolls are down there as well. Heavy Goblin Archers, which will be a little bit more durable. Some Goblin Archers up here. We never really see this back wall utilised all that much because it's kind of an awkward position, but it could be used here. I mean, it does look as though the Misty Mountains are going to be sort of walling up towards the back end of the settlement rather than trying to defend the outer walls. Maybe hoping to sort of consolidate their forces and not allow the individual quality of Dol Amroth's units to really have too much of an effect. Cave Troll Drum is going to be very important to buff the morale. The White Orc Fearmongers are in there, I can see them, as well as some Heavy Goblin Spears. The Goblin King's Bodyguard are there, probably for the generals. Indeed, that one. Blackback Berserker is very damaging against the Dol Amroth infantry as well. More crossbows, more archers and the like, and another mangonel, as well as more AP troops in the shape of the Mountain Orc Berserkers. I'd imagine there's more higher end units in there somewhere as well. There's certainly more Mountaineeric Host at the very least. And yeah, Cave Troll Drummers for both factions as well. So I think I will make a little bit of a cut here, because I imagine what's probably going to happen based on the amount of frames there are is Dol Amroth are probably going to take quite a lot of time using their catapults to make several holes in the wall before advancing in. And also they're going to need to get into position. So I will make a little cut here and we will rejoin when the battle is beginning. So actually we do have the first engagements happening a little bit sooner than I actually expected. A combination here of the Ethelon Men-at-Arms and the Ethelon Halberdiers from Grimm colliding with the initial ranks of Engsvitz's army, the Goblin Infantry just holding them in place, while inevitably the Misty Mountains are going to be utilising their ranged units to try and get as much value as possible. Goblin Archers shooting in here. The shields on the Ethelon Men-at-Arms will shield them from those very low quality arrows quite easily. But the Ethelon Halberdiers will take a few losses, especially as sort of the mix and match approach that the Men-at-Arms and the Halberdiers have here. They're sort of mixed in with one another rather than the Men-at-Arms leading the way and then the Halberdiers pushing in from behind. But sometimes when you want to move quickly, you don't really have the luxury of laying out your troops in the way that you would ideally want, but Halberdiers obviously pushing forward. The quality of these units is easily going to be enough to deal with Goblin Infantry. The Goblin Infantry trying to get back into a position where some of the heavier units can help them out, but even the heavy Goblin Infantry is not really going to be ideally suited to deal with the Dol Amroth quality. And ultimately that's why I think you can see that the Misty Mountains have adopted a very defensive posture in this battle. They're not going to try and defend the outer walls at all. And I actually do agree with that, because the one thing that the Misty Mountains will want to do is simply make the battlefield as small as possible and make it so that Dol Amroth can't possibly chew their way through the entirety of the Misty Mountains army. Whereas if they spread out, you know, the Misty Mountains army is going to be way thinner and the quality of Dol Amroth is then going to be able to play more of a part. Although having said that, some of these positions over here the Misty Mountains do need to be a little bit careful of. They do need to make sure they don't undercommit on these front lines right from the off here, because certainly units like the Goblin Infantry and the Heavy Goblin Infantry are not going to be sufficient for dealing with even the most basic of Dol Amroth's infantry units. You can see that one of the Men-at-Arms does fall at the hands of that Goblin Sword, but for the most part the Ethelon Men-at-Arms, while I did say they weren't anything too special in the army compositions, they are still significantly stronger than something like the Heavy Goblin Infantry, especially when they're getting support as they are from something like Ethelon Halberdiers, which will be ideal in this situation because, of course, the Heavy Goblin Infantry, what little survivability they do have, largely comes from their rather poor quality Goblin-made armour. Pikemen rushing in there. There's a few Goblins still standing in that gatehouse left behind, but that won't last too much longer. Tirithea Marksman firing away. I'm not sure why the frames are stuttering. That might be the Rangers somewhere in the battlefield, but yeah, it's rather strange. Tirithea Marksman up on the walls from Matt Grimm. He's going to be shooting in as well, which is not going to be ideal from a Misty Mountains perspective, because the one thing that surrendering the outer walls does give the attackers the advantage in is they can certainly get their own archers into a good position, especially with this engagement. Like, I feel as though the Misty Mountains, if they were going to pull back, they should have done it properly and maybe gone a little bit further back than they currently are. As it is, they're in full range of the attacking archers, and that's going to be bad, because the one thing that they certainly need to happen here is they need their trash to stand in the way and last as long as possible. Not going to last very long at all if they're under arrow fire, to be honest with you. The Snow Trolls are wading in, and the Snow Trolls will be very, very good against the Ethelon Men-at-Arms in particular. They may not be as strong in prolonged combat as something like the Olag Kai or the Trolls of the White Hand, but against basic sword and shield line infantry from the Western Kingdoms of Men, trolls like this will still be able to inflict a lot of damage. The problem will come in the shape of the damage the Halberdiers are able to do. There's a lot of arrows flying back and forth. The Heavy Goblin crossbows are firing as well, which is probably why we're seeing an awful lot of casualties on the front line. I mean, to be fair, Those bolts will punch right through the armour of Dol Amroth nicely. The halberdiers are probably the one they want to fight more than anything. You can see here pushing through. Very few goblins left behind on the rapid retreat, but here we can see the Dor Amroth pikemen and the civilians immediately under pretty withering arrow fire from the heavy goblin archers. I mean, if I would suggest that perhaps, you know, it's not really the best thing to try and lead the way with pikemen. You probably want to be saving them for later because they don't do an awful lot of damage, but later on when there's no arrow fire flying around, their phalanx can be incredibly difficult to break down, especially with both armies then probably being very battered and bruised. Sending them in first, though, gives a unit like the heavy goblin archers, who are not particularly good, you know, their quality is not really there. It gives them the ability to rack up a decent kill count. I mean, the civilians, it's not too much of a concern to see the civilians get shot down by the arrows from a Dol Amroth perspective, but pikemen are not the sort of thing you want to be losing in the early game. I mean, to be fair, the heavy goblin archers are of low enough quality that the armour upgrade probably is making a difference here, but even then, you really don't want to be losing any pikes to arrows this early in the fight, in my opinion. Goblin infantry standing in the way, there's also some heavy goblin spears waiting in the wings. But again, this is where Dol Amroth should be a little bit more comfortable than Rohan overall, because again, better armour, better shields. They should be able to withstand the arrow fire here from the goblins. It's also worth saying as well that the Misty Mountains doesn't have as good archers as Karn or Rune had in the last battle, albeit the crossbows should be more than enough to make up for that, to be honest with you. Meanwhile, down here, you can see Dol Amroth continuing to push in. There goes a shot from the mangonel, missing. Not too surprising there, pushing in further with the Athlon men-at-arms and the Athlon halberdiers. The heavy goblin infantry and the goblin infantry are all to stand in the way, and once again, from a quality perspective here, Dol Amroth will be quite pleased by how the early engagements are going. Having said that, over here, King of the North and Grimm's armies probably taking more in the way of crossbow bolts, which is certainly going to make a difference. You can see here the goblin infantry very much on its last legs as Dol Amroth continue to bulldoze their way forward. Still, there's not many halberdiers left. That's not good. Again, this is the danger of using the mangonel as the Misty Mountains. If you hit your own men, you're immediately going to tank their morale, especially on your lower tier units like your goblin archers. Now they're being engaged in melee as well, I would imagine we're going to see them route back to the town centre, although morale does stabilise pretty quickly. But I feel as though the Misty Mountains, not a particularly well constructed defence here. They're just sort of leaving their units out in the open. They need to sort of organise a little bit better. Perhaps this is all part of the ruse and they just want Dol Amroth to push in a little bit too aggressively and then they can utilise their crossbows to good effect. I mean, the crossbows are certainly hitting their marks over here, getting some good kills on the Dol Amroth forces as they move forward. The goblin archers also chipping in with some damage, but I mean, time will tell whether Dol Amroth have the manpower to continue an assault like this, because, you know, again, the Misty Mountains almost certainly have a lot of manpower they're willing to burn, whereas Dol Amroth largely going for perhaps more quality-focused armies. There's a lot of Parathil champions and Black Swans on the field today. You know, they've decided to forego a lot of armour upgrades perhaps to facilitate that as well. Still goblin archers reloading up here on the walls, and they do have a good shot, even though they may not be of the highest quality. And the Dol Amroth shield should do quite a lot of work in blocking the damage they can dish out. I mean, it's pretty ideal for the heavy goblin archers, to be honest with you, to be up here doing their damage. Some crossbows waiting in the wings. There's still some better goblin units to be committed as well in the Mountaineer Coast and the spears. Or more spears, I should say. The AP on the heavy goblin spears, the staying power as well, and the mass makes the heavy goblin spears just a really good unit for the Misty Mountains to use. Like, they're rarely going to be able to beat units of genuine quality, but they will inflict some damage. They will stand in the way. They're not as strong as they used to be in the previous patch of the game, but they're still decent. Definitely one of the better budget picks that the Misty Mountains have available to them. The Misty Mountains, of course, in my opinion, certainly the most numbers-focused faction in the game. Quantity is what they're all about. Again, another very poorly placed mangonel shot, to be honest with you, right into the centre mass of the goblin archers, and that, of course, will send them routing. But it will at least give them a clearer shot, and the closer that Dol Amroth get to the mangonel, in theory, the easier the shot will be. Over here on this flank, Engsvit's still utilising his crossbows very freely, getting some good hits there into those Athlon halberdiers, which, again, a phalanx unit, potentially very damaging as well. Armour-piercing phalanx. So probably a good idea to get rid of them, although I would certainly suggest that you need at least some of your ranged units for later on to deal with the scary Dol Amroth heavy swordsman. Haven Guard in particular, the Misty Mountains really don't have anything in melee that's able to go toe-to-toe with them. The Blackback Berserkers are all well and good, but they are certainly more focused on the damage they can dish out before inevitably burning out, whereas the Haven Guard are able to keep themselves alive a little bit more easily. You can see there the artillery continuing. Mangonel hitting the roof of their own settlement, and certainly already there are several buildings within this settlement which are burning. Again, good hits there from the catapult into the heavy goblin crossbows and goblin archers. Goblin archers look like they're out of ammunition, so they're heading to the front line, but massive damage being dealt to the heavy goblin crossbows, I have to say. It's unlikely they'll kill off the entire unit with a catapult, but you can certainly cut down on the amount of DPS they can do, and to be honest with you, this Misty Mountains defence is not all that well prepared to deal with the advance that's coming for them. More men-at-arms and halberdiers just continuing to push forward, and scattered units of heavy goblin units are not going to be enough to stop them, to be honest with you. The crossbows may have dealt a decent amount of damage, but they're putting an awful lot of faith in that. There goes one of the mangonels. Again, not too surprising that. The catapult, you know what you're going to get from the catapult for the most part. There is a bit of variability, but the mangonel is completely unpredictable with how it often performs. Over here on this side, things may be going a little bit more to code for the defenders. They have a much more cohesive front line. They've got the trash in there, they've got the spears holding the line, they've got the archers from on high, and also the towers, which are actually chipping in with a bit of damage as well, which is stopping blindness from advancing any further. But with how well things are going on the other side, I would say for the attackers, all blindness really needs to do is engage with the enemy and keep them occupied, while his allies continue to push forward. There's still a lot of crossbow bolts flying in. How long will the heavy goblin infantry truly stand up to this sort of punishment? Heavy goblin infantry, of course, a very low quality line infantry unit, but it's kind of the name of the game for the Misty Mountains. Zerg mentality. This catapult is still in position, ready to fire. They've actually got the Gondorian uniform on, but we won't mention that. Trying to fire in again, narrowly missing. Actually getting a hit there, killing off one of the cave troll drummers and hitting into the centre mass there of the heavy goblin spears. A decent hit, more damage done to the settlement as well. I mean, I would imagine Dol Amroth want to capture their town back, or recapture their town, largely intact, and they do seem to be doing an awful lot of damage to it at the moment. These buildings just continuing to take a bit of a beating. Over here, meanwhile, Doran Ernil pikemen getting into view once again, and that's the only excuse the heavy goblin archers need to once again start opening up on these unshielded units. So certainly the defenders are trying to go after the right sort of targets with their ranged units, trying to take advantage of the fact that these pikemen have been committed quite early. Heavy goblin archers getting a few volleys off there, but of course Dol Amroth are able to respond in kind. Their Doran Ernil archers as Tirithea marksmen here as well. There's more pikemen heading up over here from King of the North now. So again, that does say to me that all they want to do over here is engage and sort of occupy the goblins, because that's what pikes are very good at doing, but you know, putting them into range of archers is questionable. Meanwhile, over here, reinforcements have been committed now by the Misty Mountains, a much more cohesive front line now that the Mountaineer Host have arrived on it. Goblin archers that are out of ammunition have also been committed over there, but of course very limited use in melee. Mangonel there, I think narrowly missing the Tirithea marksman. I don't think you'd rout Tirithea marksman per se anyway. But now actually Dol Amroth are going to need to start committing more to this front line if they want to try and keep it afloat, because the Mountaineer Host, being completely healthy, are easily going to be able to swallow up the Athlon men-at-arms that were left on the front line. Some of these depleted units being recommitted. Catapult sort of going around. I think now the dynamic has shifted a little bit over here. The attackers are sort of content to just sort of engage and not really commit too much, whereas over here, once again, like, all of these Dol Amroth troops are kind of just held up. They're not really able to get anywhere. They could go up onto the walls here if they wanted to through this doorway and head up here, but that would put them right into a melee with the Mountain Orc Berserkers, and that AP is maybe something they don't want to be dealing with. Heavy Goblin Archers now out of ammunition, so of course they're just going to be thrown onto the front line to once again hold up the attackers for as long as possible. They'll be slightly better at that than the standard Goblin Archers on account of their armour, but of course they're still very poor in melee. Maybe trying to go after the Mountain Orc Berserkers. Mountain Orc Berserkers would definitely be a good Well, heavy goblin crossbows are now in position, and based on the denseness of that Dol Amroth blob, I definitely think now is the right time to start firing a few crossbow volleys. Still the tower's firing away as well. Decent volleys coming in here, getting into those pikemen. And again, the AP from the heavy goblin spears with the support of the archers might be enough to keep the men-at-arms at bay, so if you can take away the pike support, maybe that's all that's required. Archers trying to kill off the heavy goblin crossbows. They don't have the best of angles though, and it's only the most basic claw and Urnal archers anyway, so the damage maybe not going to be up to the task. The reinforcements have arrived. The catapult crew is actually caught in melee somehow. They need to get the artillery pieces away from here. Otherwise the mangonel could turn around, and even with how inaccurate the mangonel is, they can still hit. Still, the support from the Dol Amroth archers is probably what's keeping this front line relatively even, because in terms of numbers, certainly Dol Amroth are a little bit thin on the ground. There's more troops arriving now, though. A full unit of Athlon halberdiers once again. That AP is going to be very useful against the Mountaineer at coast. As well as, of course, those arrows. Catapult trying to sort of swivel in position. Medieval 2's siege equipment pathfinding is truly a thing to behold. There's nothing more frustrating than seeing your artillery spin on the spot as it decides where it wants to go. Tirithea marksmen continuing to fire. They don't have the best arc of fire, to be honest with you, but they're killing off that unit of heavy goblin crossbows, and again, the heavy goblin crossbows look as though they still had ammunition as well, so if you can kill off a unit like that without it using its entire ammunition supply, that's going to be a very, very good thing indeed. But still, this front line doesn't look like it's going to be budging anytime soon. And I think I see now why this battle is so long, because I feel as though these two choke points are going to be the epicenters of the battle for a long time to come. So, sort of buckle up, we're going to be in for the long haul here, I think, as both of these two teams are just going to be continuing to funnel men into both of these fights, and hoping that they can do so more efficiently than their opponent. The crossbows are going to be a major factor as well, of course. Dol Amroth taking casualties from these bolts as they come flying in. Maybe not as devastating as it could be, though, which is definitely something that Dol Amroth can take some comfort in. If the goblins continue to hold the line with those spearmen, the archers sort of shoring up that front line as well. They can always commit the Mountaineer at coast should they need to. And more spears. There's a mangonel on the way over as well, the other mangonel that the Misty Mountains have brought. This one is still in effect. Ooh, that was... Well, I mean, that's an interesting move, because I mean that is going to, it does rout the depleted Dol Amroth forces, but it also left the Misty Mountains front line wavering, and some of those Dol Amroth forces are going to reconnect as well. More ranged fire coming in. I mean, I'd say that was probably worth it from a Misty Mountains perspective, sending some of those Athlon units routing. Cave Troll Drummers close enough perhaps that their morale buffing effects are really having an impact. The mangonel, being the unpredictable beast that it is. Are they going to fire it again? Doesn't look like it for the time being. I think they realise that if they fire it again, they're probably just going to rout their own men this time and give Dol Amroth a way to get further up the hill. Belfast Marines getting into position. To be fair though, this Misty Mountains front line at this point, now that the reinforcements from Dol Amroth have arrived on the front, is holding on by a thread, so the Misty Mountains could probably get away with firing, danger close. Or they need to reinforce this front line, but I think they're probably eager to not reinforce it, because Dol Amroth have got their archers in a good position to fire. Tirithea marksmen. Speaking of the Tirithea marksmen, they are getting onto the front line as well. Those men-at-arms have returned from routing, and they're going to re-engage with the Misty Mountains infantry. Belfast Marines, they look depleted actually. Only 49 of them left. I wonder what happened to them. They still have ammunition, you can tell. Very strange indeed. Untitled Champions waiting in the wings. Their fear-causing effects could be the final nail in the initial front line's coffin, to be honest with you. Over here, meanwhile, still not a great deal of movement. King of the North's pikemen are starting to make their way onto the front line, but again, they don't have the armour upgrade either, so they're going to be even more vulnerable to any missile fire that they perceive. And indeed, that may be what's happening here, getting a unit of standard Goblin Archers up on the wall to just try and get some fire in there. Heavy Goblin Spears. these troll drummers are definitely close enough for the morale buffs to be coming into effect, which does of course mean that's exactly what the Misty Mountains want. They just want these troops on the front line to hold for as long as possible, but to be honest with you, they're not really holding to any sort of benefit at this point. If you're just going to have that on the front line, you need the archers or something to do some damage from on high. This is also going to be an issue. Dol Amroth are now trying to engage up on the walls, and they're doing so with Parathil Champions, so they're committing a unit of genuine quality up here to do so. Now, the Mountain Orc Berserkers, their AP will be useful against the Parathil Champions, but I'd have to say the Parathil Champions, with their skill, with their base damage, especially considering the very lightly armoured nature of the Mountain Orc Berserkers, I would give a heavy advantage there to the Parathil Champions, or they should. They should win that. They're the ones taking damage at the moment, though. But the fight should turn in favour of the Parathil Champions, I would imagine. Now we're starting to see some fire from the Goblin Archers up on the walls, which is probably what was needed a little bit sooner, to be honest with you, because I think a little bit of disorganisation is starting to set in to the Misty Mountains line. They're going to try and recapture that with the Mountaineer at Coast now being committed, the unit that was in reserve. And that should be sufficient as long as they can get them covering this whole area and the Dol Amroth troops don't start spilling in to the wider area. Meanwhile, down here, Dol Amroth were moving forward, but interestingly enough, again, friendly fire from artillery having an effect, and that might be enough, honestly, to break this position. I mean, the Mangonel's probably out of ammunition at this point, so they're just going to get the artillery piece in the way, get the artillery crew fighting on the front line in the way. Another unit of Mountaineer at Coast have been committed, and so the Misty Mountains haven't given too much ground, but they are very much in the firing line here of the catapults. But I don't know whether this was intentional or not, but now this wreck of the Mangonel might be in the way of the catapult volleys from actually hitting the Misty Mountains units. So maybe a stroke of genius, or maybe completely pointless, we shall see. The depleted Belfast Marines on the front line. You can see here depleted skirmishers rejoining the front line fight as well. Neither side too eager to commit forward everything at this point. There's also some heavy golden spears coming down, but there is sort of, things are starting to ratchet up a little bit now. Meanwhile over here, still the archers having an impact on the joint attack from King of the North and from blindness. You can see over here actually that the Mountain Orc Berserker's winning, and I can only assume, yeah, you can see there the heavy goblin crossbows in a perfect position to lay down some fire support, and the Parathil Champions have really been cut down to size as a result. So King of the North will be quite disappointed with that, because of course the Parathil Champions are one of the real powerhouses of the Dol Amroth infantry force, and he was committing them up here presumably to try and take this wall quickly, but it hasn't really worked out that way. The Mountain Orc Berserkers stood in the way sufficiently enough, and the crossbows did the lion's share of the damage there. Still 54 of them left alive, so a couple more volleys maybe to make sure that that fight is insurmountable. The Mountaineer at Coast still on the front line here. Still very much standing in the way. And now a retreat from the Athlon Men-at-Arms, although they probably need to stay on the front line, otherwise they're just going to rout. And the Cave Troll Drummers definitely earning their salt here, because again, those morale buffing effects, I doubt the Misty Mountains front line would have been standing up this long to Dol Amroth pressure without a morale buff. And that is exactly what they want. Meanwhile, over on the other side, several buildings set ablaze over here. More of a chaotic fight over here, but still the Cave Troll Drummers over here doing their thing, making sure that some of these lower tier goblins stay in the fight for just that little bit longer, delaying the Dol Amroth push just that little bit longer. And that could be the key to victory here, because of course the more time they buy, the more the Misty Mountain skirmishers should be able to do some damage. But now you can see a decent shot for the Belfast Marines to fire their javelins in. Not really worthwhile going after the Goblin Archers, to be honest with you. But the Mountaineer at Coast, I mean, just to try and push through this defensive line a little bit more quickly. Maybe Dol Amroth feel the need to commit some more damage here. And again, Belfast Marines, they're decent javelins. They're nothing too special, but they should be more than sufficient to do enough damage here. But the high ground, Goblin Archers, heavy Goblin Archers at that, shooting into the advancing Dol Amroth troops. Two of their marksmen starting to push forward. Dol Amroth still have plenty in reserve back here, but one wonders how long they can truly keep this up for. Another unit of Parathil Champions waiting. A hit into the centre mass of the Goblin Archers, but I think that's kind of a sign of how desperate Dol Amroth are getting to try and deal with the Misty Mountain skirmishers. Because to be honest with you, like, this unit of Goblin Archers probably already paid for itself. To use a catapult on it now seems like desperation to me that they need to try and deal with the skirmishers somehow, because they're pushing up here and they're taking damage all the time, and this single unit of Mountaineer at coast is holding back the Dol Amroth infantry while these archers are able to get some decent value. And Dol Amroth really can't afford these kind of losses, to be honest with you. And now more reinforcements are on the way. Another full unit of heavy goblin spears, 250 strong. Stats wise they're not brilliant, but again it's the numbers, it's their holding power, and it's the AP which is going to come in really handy against the Dol Amrothian troops. And now Dol Amroth starting to suffer morale problems as well. So far so good, I have to say, for the defenders, but again they have gone for more numbers focused approach than maybe some defenders would, so we'll see if their quality is enough to see them over the line. Definitely a tale of two philosophies here. A quantity focused approach on the defence, more quality on the attack as well, with all the Black Swans and Perithil Champions and Haven Guard and the like. But of course this means that Dol Amroth kind of need their quality to start doing serious damage to the quantity. And so far I have to say that hasn't really been the case. The Mangonel is now firing. They have a perfect shot down this hill, to be honest with you, so they'd be mad not to. Oof, dear oh dear. That looked devastating. It looked more devastating than it was, to be honest with you, but that is still going to have an effect on morale. You can see the Belfast Marines are shaken. Probably not going to be enough to break. The Fearmongers are here though as well. They're another fear-causing unit. In conjunction with the Mangonel, this could prove to be a very costly road for Dol Amroth to take, to be honest with you. Still, I mean, this is a bit of a misplay from the Misty Mountains. The Cave Troll Drummers are now in melee against Halberdiers as well. They need to get out of there, really. And Engsvitz doesn't really have too much of an excuse for making a misplay like this. Like, when you've only got 2 choke points to look after, you know, losing track of a unit that's very important to the integrity of your defence is not ideal, really. They're also going to be hit by javelins. And now, the morale of the Misty Mountains will probably start to be called into question when the Cave Troll Drummers inevitably fall at this point. Engsvitz maybe dropping the ball a little bit there. More Halberdiers being committed forward, Tirithair Marksman as well. Let's go and see what's happening over on this road. Dol Amroth committing forward. Yet more reinforcements, another unit of Phalanx infantry, the Athlond Halberdiers. I mean, that AP will be useful if they can get their halberds down and in formation without taking ranged fire. Heavy Goblin Archers up here on the walls. They pulled out their little swords. That is another question. Well, I say that, they do certainly have ammunition left, but how much ammunition do the Misty Mountains have? Can they sustain this sort of pressure on Dol Amroth for an extended period of time? They're doing the right thing here, I think, by trying to take advantage of the unshielded units of Dol Amroth and getting as many kills as they possibly can. Even though that will leave them maybe a little bit low on ammunition for dealing with stuff like the Haven Guard. By that point, they can maybe hope that their numbers will be enough to overwhelm the quality. But here on the front line still, the Misty Mountains holding up resolutely, you'd have to say. Cave Troll Drummers over here in the perfect position to do so. Meanwhile over here, the Cave Troll Drummers were certainly not in the perfect position. They're still alive, amusingly enough, though. So Engsvitz may be getting away with it a bit there. But still, Dol Amroth don't really look like making any progress anytime soon. Like, they're sort of, the Misty Mountains are just sort of holding firm on both sides of the assault. Cave Troll Drummers starting to die, and Engsvitz I think is actively using his Cave Troll Drummers in melee here, which again is risky, but we shall see if it pays off. The catapult's in position here. It's not the... again, both catapults are over here. Well, 2 of the catapults. Some decent hits there into the side of the Heavy Goblin Archers, but again, having to use artillery on Goblin and Heavy Goblin Archers is a sign, I think, of Dol Amroth's growing desperation to make something happen here. Belfast Marines coming forward. More javelins to be thrown. Tirithair Marksmen fighting against something in melee, apparently, and there are a few goblins that are over here, but they will easily be dealt with, isolated as they are. And again, they're trying to shoot here into the front line, but they're not really going to do that. There's too many structures in the way, so it's a bit of a waste of ammunition, I'd have to say. Over here, Heavy Goblin Archers continuing to shoot. Again, the Misty Mountains Archers have managed to get some really nice value so far. Whether it's going to be enough in the late game when they're inevitably dry of ammunition, and Dol Amroth still have some quality, remains to be seen, but there's still a lot of numbers back here from the Misty Mountains, which is a worrying sign for Dol Amroth, the fact that they're taking these losses, but balance of power is still pretty much dead in the middle, which suggests Dol Amroth still have the strength to see this fight through. Javelins coming in. Limited casualties though, but at this point, the Goblin units are shaken, and you have to say that Cave Troll Drummers have been taken away from the front line, and maybe that's the cue for Dol Amroth to commit forward some units and try and break the spirit of the Goblins that are still fighting, because they've done very well up till now, and you just have to look at the carnage in behind them. The vast majority of that bears the blue banner of Dol Amroth. Mountain Orc Berserkers still up here. There's still these heavy Goblin Archers just waiting for a decent shot as well. Might be worthwhile going after the Belfast Marines. They don't have the best armour nor the best shields. They're not the best in melee either, to be fair, but... And conservation of ammunition is important, so... I admire the restraint, because I would be tempted to, and it might not be the worst, it might not be the best idea. Heavy Goblin Archers over here, meanwhile, still firing away, firing into the pikemen that are pushing forward again. It looks disorganised down here from Dol Amroth. There's sort of different units tripping over one another. There's a real mosh pit, a mishmash of units. And that's not what you want typically if you're playing as a Western Kingdom of Men going up against the Orcs. You want organisation. And so far, I'd have to say, Dol Amroth haven't really provided that, but there's still plenty of time left in this battle due to it being quite a long one. Still javelins being thrown, trying to break the back of this defence once and for all, getting some kills on the heavy Goblin Spearmen. There's only one drummer left, and he's about to be killed off by the Parathor Champions that are advancing forward. So another quality swordsman being brought forward here by blindness. Seeingness is his name for this battle, but we all know it's him. Heavy Goblin Spears routing, Goblin Archers routing, so finally a bit of progress up the hill for Dol Amroth, but at what cost? Time will tell. Heavy Goblin Archers continuing to try and shoot at point blank. That's a decent hit by the artillery though, and they're also going to get engaged in melee by a fear-causing unit, so they're on the verge of routing already here. The Misty Mountains may be getting a bit lax, and the White Eric Fearmongers are also routing here, so yeah, the Misty Mountains may be getting a little bit too assured of their position. And thanks to the committal there of a fear-causing unit from blindness, as well as the artillery fire, all of a sudden things not looking quite so rosy for the Misty Mountains over there. Meanwhile, Black Swan Renegades moving forward to reinforce the front line. Another unit of Mountaineer at Coast has been committed forward to try and keep this front line going. So far, Dol Amroth, again though, like Dol Amroth may have a bit of an opportunity here to push through with mass. There's a gap here that they could use and deny the Misty Mountains the ability to bottle Dol Amroth up more, and that's what I would do if I were Dol Amroth. Try and push through here, try and make it so the Misty Mountains don't have the ability to bottle us up anymore, and still more crossbow bolts coming down, doing yet more damage to this Dol Amroth push over here. It's been very, very costly for Dol Amroth over here, and they don't really have anything to show for it as of yet. There's still these Mountain Orc Berserkers up on the walls ready to meet another assault. But at this point, I mean, the only thing Dol Amroth can hope for at this point over on this side is they've run out of crossbows ammunition. While over here, more fires erupting throughout the settlement. If Dol Amroth do end up winning this, it's going to be quite the clean-up operation to try and get this city back into the state it was when they inevitably lost it. Defeat seems certain for the Parathor Champions. They're a little bit outnumbered on this front line. Mountaineer at Coast aren't a unit to be taken lightly, and the Fearmongers are also here. More range support coming in from Dol Amroth to try and help out. I mean, the Fearmongers are a good target to go after with archers, but most of these arrows are actually hitting the shielded Mountaineer at Coast that are in front of them. Fearmongers are starting to push in now. The Ghetto Fountain Guard themselves. Some pikemen down here as well. More fresh pikemen being committed forward as well. That is the whistle of crossbows, I think. And indeed it is. They don't have the best angle, to be fair, but they're still going to be hitting Dol Amroth as they advance up the hill, which from their perspective is not really what they would be wanting. It's been a very atrocious fight, this, though. And usually that's something the Orcs will quite like, because their numbers generally will be enough. The Black Swan Renegades, as soon as they were on the front line, the crossbows immediately sent them packing. And yeah, I mean, it's been a bit of a disastrous engagement over here, if I'm being honest, with Dol Amroth. If you just look at the carnage that they've wrought. A lot of goblins have died over here as well, but this engagement has been entirely on the terms of the Misty Mountains. They've been able to dictate the pace of things over here. The other engagement has been a bit more back and forth. But over here, Dol Amroth have never really had the upper hand, which is always going to be a good sign for the outnumbered defenders. They haven't committed stuff like their Blackbacks or their Goblin King bodyguard yet either, but they're probably running a little bit low on ammunition at this point. Meanwhile, Goblin Archers, 10 of them being committed to the front line, a real powerhouse that is. But now, with the White Uruk Fearmongers right on the front line here, able to utilise their phalanx and their armour-piercing damage, the Perithil champions are in dire need, I think, of a bit of assistance on this front line if they're going to make anything happen. I mean, Dol Amroth have made up some ground on this hill, but they're not all the way to the top yet, which is undoubtedly where they want to be. Black Swan Renegades being pushed forward again, AP, but we shall see. I mean, we'll see if Dol Amroth not really committing forward units. Like, when the Misty Mountains buckled a little bit, that may have been a good time to really flood forwards with a lot of strength. Dol Amroth didn't really do that. I'm just wondering if they're going to live to regret that. More javelins coming in from the Belfast Marines, going to be able to do some more damage. A little bit more pressure being put on now with the javelin men throwing their volleys and the Black Swan Renegades arriving. Those mace men will do some decent AP damage in conjunction with those javelins. That should be enough for Dol Amroth to seize the initiative over on this hill once again. What have we here? Tirithea Marksman. Getting some decent volleys. I mean, they've probably racked up a decent kill count for themselves, but now actually Ankswit's committing forward a unit of genuine quality. This is an interesting gambit from him to send his general forward. The Goblin King's bodyguard, not the most damaging unit of infantry of the bodyguards here, and putting them up against pikemen and AP infantry of different sorts could be seen as a bit of a mistake, and I think he realises that. Like, I think he wanted this front line to survive, but it's quite clear at this point that it's not going to, so he's going to retreat and reorganise his defence at the top of the hill, which is the right thing to do. If you see a situation is not developing in your favour, you should retreat from it and not just continue to throw your men's lives away in pursuit of something that's not going to happen. Balance of forces is evenly matched. Mountain Uruk host still holding fast on this front line. Certainly over here the Misty Mountains have had a very good fight so far, and Dol Amroth continuing to take pretty shocking losses over here, to be honest with you. Belfast Marines throwing their javelins way over the building. I mean, in order to throw a javelin like that, you would need to be breaking the world record for the javelin throw, I think, to be able to get that much height on it. What is the world record for the javelin throw? I don't know, but certainly I think that those Belfast Marines are batting well above the average to be able to achieve a feat like that. Well, another volley coming in, more casualties that Dol Amroth they can't afford to sustain this sort of thing for much longer, surely. It's been such a punishing climb up that hill for them, and they're still not all the way to the top of the hill over here, to be honest with you. There's still a unit of heavy Goblin Spears standing in the way. There's still archers giving them some volleys on their way up as well, but Black Swan Renegades in the vanguard utilising their AP damage to give Dol Amroth some more ground as they try and push up this hill. Halberdiers backing them up, but again another unit of stalwart spearmen standing in the way. And that was a shot from the Mangonel, I believe. Not sure where it landed. Not here, that's for certain. In come the Halberdiers and pikemen try and back up this push. And Dol Amroth need to make something happen here, because it is a very chaotic advance thus far, but we are getting into the business end of this fight where something is going to give here. Whether Dol Amroth's quality does start to assert itself on the lower quality of the goblins, or whether Dol Amroth simply run out of numbers and they're simply not able to push their way through. I don't know what that was, but it sounded like it hit some sort of target. Blindness is trying... oh, it did. So Blindness does have a shot onto the heavy Goblin Spearmen over here, which could be a bit of a game changer, to be honest with you. If he continues to do that, the morale of these heavy Goblin Spears is going to fall apart, and they will rout, and that will allow Dol Amroth to start pushing forward. Which is exactly what they need. Dol Amroth needs something like that to start happening. The longer this battle stays the same, the better you have to say it is for the Misty Mountains. Heavy Goblin Archers being committed to the front line, which is a sign once again that this front line is maybe looking a little bit more thin on the ground, but still Dol Amroth not looking like they're going to push through this defence in a timely manner. Heavy Goblin Spearman. That's not Berserkers sort of standing there and waiting as well. Such a costly fight this for Dol Amroth. Would certainly be disheartening if you were a soldier on the front line of this fight. It's the Mountaineer at coast. Continue to fight hard. Obviously a decent unit of line infantry that the Misty Mountains have at their disposal. If this were heavy goblin infantry, the Athlon men-at-arms would be having a better time of it, but as it is, this unit, which is technically speaking on loan from the as yet unreleased Dol Guldur faction, is a much harsher opponent to have to try and deal with. Drummers are a little bit far away now at this point though. And again, a little bit more of a skeleton crew over here, so I think the Misty Mountains are sort of preparing for the inevitable retreat to the town centre maybe. Still got some decent units back here. They still have the Mangonel. Over here though, Dol Amroth are making ground. Heavy Goblin Spears getting pushed through. Dol Amroth at this point going to be able to inflict some good damage. In come some Goblin Archers to try and slow this down. Be interested to see how the Misty Mountains respond to this, because normally what you will see them do is retreat to the town centre and try and use this road, but they still have so many units over there that I kind of feel as though they need to defend this road. They still need to send units to defend this road. The Goblin King's bodyguard is being pushed forward as well, which is a risky move again by Engsvitz. Again, they're very strong. Any bodyguard unit with multiple HP is strong, but they alone are probably not going to be able to stop the momentum that Dol Amroth have at this point. How much reinforcements does Dol Amroth really have though? Not much. Most of it's actually over here, interestingly enough. Arrows being launched over the houses. You can see here, heavy Goblin Archers. Most of the Mountaineer at coast at this point are gone, which means of course heavy Goblin Archers are going to be the primary force fighting on the front line, which is, from a quality perspective, not ideal for you. Defeat seems certain, as it would against most opponents. I can see Mountain Orc Berserkers maybe going to be used as a rear guard, or maybe they're going to try and retreat. I mean, I try and retreat them, which it does look as though is what's going to happen. Bit of AP in the late game could be key, and you can see now the Misty Mountains are going to pull back with as much as they are able to. So Dol Amroth, mainly because the Misty Mountains chose to abandon this front line, are finally going to be able to get through here. And, you know, they're going to hope that those Mountaineer at coast can hold on for as long as possible, retreat as much as they can to the town centre. They still have a Mangonel. They still have 2 units of Blackback Berserkers. They still have crossbowmen who are actually firing. They have a decent shot. I'm not sure whether that... Well, I mean... They're having to arc their shots slightly, but there's certainly not a lot of cover for Dol Amroth. They need to push through, so this building is giving them that cover. Do Dol Amroth have the numbers left to deal with a consolidated Misty Mountains force in the town centre? Because the problem with that, of course, is they won't be able to rout them. So the fear-causing effects of the Parathil champions won't really be able to come into effect there. The town centre is right here. Don't know how much ammunition the Mangonel has left, because you know, both Mangonels have been firing fairly consistently throughout the match, and there's only one of them left. So we'll see. Couple of volleys though, again. Dol Amroth will be the one susceptible to routing here in the late game, we shall see. Dol Amroth may also have their catapult, which will come into play here in the late game. As the goblins once again are sent fleeing, as Dol Amroth now pushing forward. Finally a bit of clear road in front of them. No goblins to have to concern themselves with for the time being as they get towards the town centre. But, you know, healthy Parathil champions, healthy Black Swan renegades. The Wanderers of Nimrodel are going to be a real problem as well. If the Misty Mountains have dumped all of their ranged powers, then the Wanderers of Nimrodel are going to be extremely difficult to deal with, and Dol Amroth can sort of shoot the goblins as they bottled themselves up here. And the goblins may have to sort of be aggressive, sort of draw Dol Amroth in and then push back out if that is the case, because I think... Oh no, they still have some goblin archers. And they still have those crossbows as well, so... They're not completely defenceless. Snaga skirmishers as well. So time will tell how this unfolds. I think we'll go up to ×2 speed here as Dol Amroth ready their assault on the town centre. I think we'll sort of get the lay of the land here pretty quickly as the Wanderers of Nimrodel are shooting in. This is the problem. The Misty Mountains are going to have to take cover, and then Dol Amroth can push forwards and establish more of a beachhead here and not allow themselves to get bottled up again as they have done throughout this battle so far. Heavy goblin crossbowmen. They're out of ammunition, just being left here, making sure there's something in the way of any sort of Dol Amroth advance, so that then the Misty Mountains can rapidly close back in. Doran Ernil archers over here, Wanderers of Nimrodel. Again, they do have some units of quality in here. They have the Goblin King's Bodyguard, a couple of units of Blackback Berserkers. Most of the other stuff, though, is basic to low tier. So, certainly from a quality perspective, Dol Amroth have the advantage here. But Dol Amroth have to attack into the Misty Mountains. And so units like the crossbows, the skirmishers, the troll drummers are still here, which will, of course, be boosting that morale nicely. Some goblins just trying to take a chunk out of the rangers, not being allowed to by the halberdiers, though. Once again, I think ×2 speed as Dol Amroth decide what it is they want to do. Very nicely done. Nice positioning here by the Wanderers of Nimrodel. So once again, it's going to be... And also, yeah, that's a good point. Like, these buildings you actually can shoot through. So this is another example of those sort of see-through buildings that we've seen time and time again. And now, Dol Amroth coming in. The Parathil Champion's getting a charge. Not getting many kills, but also immediately retreating so as to avoid the wrath of crossbows and javelins. They're going to come back in for another bite of the cherry now, though. And those rangers still able to get some kills. And I think Dol Amroth may have enough in the... Well, probably will have enough in the tank here to see themselves over the line against this Misty Mountains defense. I feel as though, quality-wise, they definitely have the edge, but also, you know, the one thing that the Misty Mountains would need in this late game to actually have an advantage would be the ranged advantage, and they don't. You know, they're having to deal with rangers shooting into this front line and just butchering it here, and oof, that is devastating. Lots of kills for the Wanderers of Nimrodel here late on. Doranano Pikemen, Parathil Champions. Again, we've seen this before as well, and I'm surprised actually that people haven't cottoned on to the fact that maybe they could retreat some of their infantry in the final stand back over to here. Just because it would, you know, even if you just stashed them up on the walls, as it were, just so then it takes away the attacker's ability to just station archers over here and shoot into the town centre like they often do. Still, I think Dol Amroth have probably earned this. They're sending in the Blackback Berserkers to get shredded now. I think, yeah, like... Dol Amroth have put up with a lot of punishment throughout this entire battle, but they have taken it on the chin, and to be fair, I do think they would come out of this deserved victors, in spite of the fact that I've been saying throughout the battle that they've sort of struggled to really establish themselves. But ultimately, the issue the Misty Mountains I think were always going to have was, would they have enough quality to see themselves over the line in the late game, and I think that that is not going to be the case, to be honest. We still have the Mangonel. You can see here just the Rangers able to get high quality kills on Blackback Berserkers and Goblin King Bodyguard. That's always a bad sign if you're on the defense in this sort of situation. What have we here? Civilians? Still alive. Oh, there goes Azog. I think that was at the hands of a pike as well. That swordsman was in mid-swing when he fell, after all. Black Swan Renegades back at... Yeah, the quality of Dol Amroth here is going to be too much. The positioning of those Rangers, too ideal. If not for the Rangers, then maybe it would have been closer here in the late game, but I do think that that is what's going to give Dol Amroth the advantage they need to go on to claim this battle. Mangonel getting into position. Will the Mangonel be the hero? I'm going to assume not, but you never know. Blackback Berserkers still here. There's a lot of damage done to the settlement. The black smoke that's rising from several of the buildings in the lower part of the city. What will the Mangonel do? I mean, the crew is going to die if they don't hurry up and get at least one shot off. Will they shoot? That's what I'm waiting for. In go the Heavy Goblin Archers, trying to hold the line long enough for the Mangonel to get a shot off. Ah, there we go. I mean, to be fair, decent amount of wavering going on back there from the Marines and the civilians, but not on the front line where it's really needed. Well, shaken. It's not going to be enough to... The morale will stabilise anyway, but the Mangonel trying its best. The Snaga Skirmish is probably racking up a decent kill count for themselves. And there is still a few units back here. Wanderers of Nimrodel waiting. Javi's being committed forward now as well. There's still, of course, the Haven Guard. 2 units of Haven Guard at that, as well as a fair few Black Swan Renegades. I think that's 3 units of them. And another unit of Parathil Champions, as well as a sort of assortment of other units as well. So yeah, from a quality perspective, Dol Amroth actually hitting their own men there. More volleys from the Rangers. Dol Amroth undoubtedly just wanting to pour forwards. The Mangonel crew getting into a better position to shoot, although this time it's just rotting meat, which also reduces morale, albeit to a much less impressive extent to the fiery projectiles the Mangonels usually utilise. Tirithea marksmen also joining in on the fun now, shooting into the goblin defences. And see where the Rangers are shooting the trails of red blood. Doran Ernil pikemen there, Blackback Mountain berserkers, Black Swan renegades mobilising to the front line as well. It's only a matter of time at this point. I mean, the numbers of the Misty Mountains will allow them to hold on for a little bit longer, you would think, but not too much. You can see there, 10% the differential, which seems about right. The hallmark of a close enough battle. But in the end, Dol Amroth just have a little bit too much left in the tank here for the Misty Mountains to deal with. Wanderers of Nimrodel firing into that goblin blob once again, as Dol Amroth starting to make some serious ground into the courtyard here of the castle. Well, courtyard outside the castle. Technically, this would be the courtyard of the castle itself. I don't think you can go back in here. I think this gate is just impassable, which is a shame, because this would be an interesting last stand position to take. Of course, you would not be able to do so really, because the town centre is down here and you need to defend it. Goblin archers starting to fire, trying to do some damage. Dol Amroth's front line is actually starting to take damage here, and I think Dol Amroth, you know, if they just committed forward everything here all at once, they would break the Misty Mountains a little bit more quickly. As it is, they're allowing the Misty Mountains to get more kills than maybe is necessary, routing off a few more of the units as well. Black Swans that are on the front line, tangling with the heavy Goblin Spearmen, which they are significantly stronger than, but a combination of both AP units with the Mountain Orc Berserkers here may prove to be a bit of a problem for the Black Swan Renegades, to be honest with you. Arrows flying overhead, colliding with the Belfalas Marines. And in come the Perithil Champions. Taking some hits, but decent armour. And they'll get forwards and undoubtedly be able to do some damage. Wanderers of Nimrodel firing their arrows in. Not many. Well, I mean, the Black Swans have been dealt with there, so again, Dol Amroth may be making a bit more of a meal of this than they need to. Like, they have the advantage, there's no need to be as conservative as they're being at this point. They have the goblins right where they want them. They have the range superiority. But unfortunately for them, they're feeding more kills into the goblins than is necessary. Starting to come forward with more quality now though, which this should be the straw which finally breaks the camel's back. Or the anvil which breaks the camel's back in the face of the Haven Guard, to be honest with you. Nothing the Misty Mountains have left is going to be a match for the Haven Guard. Especially not Goblin Archers that are out of ammunition. You'll scarcely see a bigger quality discrepancy in the game when it comes to a melee fight. Still some crossbowmen back here. Still some Blackback Berserkers. Let's go up to ×2 speed, actually. It's quite enough of this nonsense, to be honest with you. Dol Amroth. Have them where they need to. The Mangonel reduced to a ruin. I'm amazed that the Goblin Archers are still clinging on this front line, to be honest with you. I suppose that has a lot to do with the Trolls, who are now going to be committed to melee, but they'll very quickly be swallowed up by the Dol Amroth Heavy Swordsmen. Dol Amroth coming in, so yeah, it's, in the end, the quality of Dol Amroth proving to be too much for the Misty Mountains, but the Misty Mountains made a good go of it early on. I think the fact that they were able to put so much pressure on Dol Amroth with their range units was key. But I would also say that maybe they were a little bit too eager to use all of their ammunition. Like, They did a lot of damage, but I would say with their crossbows especially, they needed more crossbows here in the late game to be able to respond to Dol Amroth's range superiority. You can see Dol Amroth just pushing in, bulldozing through the Misty Mountains. Tundra's Fox is now the only one left. He's got some blackbacks which will take down a few, or maybe not actually, now that they're under our arrow fire, catapult fire, and being engaged by the Haven Guard. So Dol Amroth I should say, will be victorious. They will reclaim their city. They'll have to clean all the goblins' bodies out of it and repair some of the buildings that they hit with their own catapults, but overall a decent little victory this for Dol Amroth. And I do feel as though this does show that Dol Amroth can, their infantry, while it may not be as strong as some other Western Kingdoms men, Gondor especially, they are still durable enough to the point where, you know, they can engage in this sort of warfare and still be victorious. Like, they were taking a real beating earlier on in the battle and they still came through it. Whereas if this was a faction like Rohan, for example, or even one of the more lightly armoured factions of evil men like Rudauer, that may have been a killer for them. That may have been the end. But as it is, Dol Amroth showing that the way that the Western Kingdoms men operate, sort of packing on that armour, utilising shields, maybe not necessarily going for the most in terms of high damage with their bread and butter units, it can still pay off in this sort of situation. Outlasting the enemy's numbers here was key, and Dol Amroth were able to do that. So while I would say that Dol Amroth, their infantry may not be as strong as the likes of Gondor, it's still decent. There goes the general having his ribs smashed in with one of the maces of the Black Swan Renegades. But yeah, I think this one a good advert for Dol Amroth's infantry, to be honest with you. Much in the same way that I would say that Khand and Rohan have got good infantry, while Dol Amroth are principally, of course, a cavalry-focused faction with their very heavy cavalry, their knights, their lancers. Their infantry is still decent enough to do a job, especially their heavy swordsmen. I think their heavy swordsmen are superb. Their pikes and their halberds are decent as well. Their men-at-arms may not be on quite the same level as the other Western Kingdoms of men, many of them, but they're still functional, especially if you upgrade their armour, I'd have to say. I think their spears are underwhelming, to be honest, Dol Amroth. Like the Tarnostian spearmen and the even the Tirithea Wardens, like for what they cost, both of those units, they're not as good as the other Western Kingdoms of men, but overall, Dol Amroth's infantry is still able to do a job, which I feel as though this shows. They went into a pretty gnarly situation against a lot of goblins that were arrayed against them, but in the end, the really numbers-focused defence didn't work out too well for the Misty Mountains. Maybe a little bit more in terms of quality was necessary. A couple of units of Black Uruks of the Mountains certainly wouldn't have gone amiss to help deal with the Dol Amroth forces. But let's see what did the damage for the Dol Amroth armies. King of the North, 166 kills on some men-at-arms, 104 kills on some Belfast Marines. The rest of his army, 151 on the catapult as well. The catapults did okay for the attackers, certainly. Blindness's army, 920 kills on the Wanderers of Nimrodel. So I think that really does go to show that the Misty Mountains really missed a trick in the late game by allowing the Wanderers of Nimrodel to take up an ideal position and just to shoot in. If you allow Rangers that sort of room, they're going to rip through your entire army. So the Misty Mountains chose to fall back to the town centre, but I feel as though they maybe didn't really think things through, because up until that point the Misty Mountains were still in the game. But as soon as Dol Amroth were able to set up sort of range superiority, crossfires, as well as having their quality infantry units attacking from the front, it was always going to be all over for the Misty Mountains. 168 kills on the Ethelon Halberdiers, archers for the most part, ranged units in general doing the job for Blindness, and that's not too surprising because most of his infantry, I mean the Ethelon men-at-arms, they're doing okay, but most of his infantry was on that side where they were getting absolutely pounded by the heavy goblin crossbows. Grimm's army, Wanderers of Nimrodel, doing very well once again, maybe not quite to the same level, but still a good amount of kills. Good on the catapult. Several units breaking 100 kills for him, so more of an even spread rather than the heavily focused amount of kills Blindness got with his archers. Ethelon men-at-arms as well. Halberdiers doing okay. But yeah, overall, definitely those Rangers, the final nail in the Misty Mountains coffin on this occasion. So big thank you to Blindness for sending this one to me. Grimm sent it to me as well from his perspective, but Blindness was very eager for me to see this battle, so I figured it was only fitting to see it from his. But yeah, big thanks to all the players involved. Obviously very well-known names in this battle as well, so you'd expect a good quality battle, and neither side really made any serious mistakes, to be honest with you. So yeah, a good battle all in all. The next battle that I'm going to do for Reforged, I'm not sure. I have a few that I can do. But yeah, it could also be a Silmarillion one, I'm not sure. It's one of those things where, again, like my schedule is kind of dependent on sort of how much time I have to actually do a replay. So if I don't have much, it'll obviously be a shorter battle that I need to sort of do, just to sort of make sure that my schedule gets stuck to. But I feel as though I will have enough time to do sort of another more substantial battle for the video that comes out in 2 days' time. So it'll probably be another siege. I'm not sure. Again, it depends largely. If I get a Silverillion replay, I generally speaking will bump that to the front, purely because obviously it's open alpha, you know, it's new. People are going to want to see more of that. But yeah, we shall see, I think. But yeah, big thank you to Blindness for sending this one to me. Big thank you to all the players that were involved in this one as well. I think it was an RP battle. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and hope you'll join me for whatever is next.